Here I'll talk about the issue of accessibility and the limitations of relevance theory. Accessibility of relevance is very important in relevance theory, and accessibility is usually determined by certain factors like contextual factors or effects, as well as the processing effort. So the greater the accessibility is, the better would be the relevance. So we have to rely on contextual effects as well as the processing effort in order to determine the degree of relevance and the accessibility of relevance to the speakers or hearers. Contextual effects including things such as adding new information to a certain talk or communication, or revising the old information by strengthening it or by contradicting it. Similarly, it might include something which might weaken the old information already been shared by the speaker and hearer, or already available in the context. The more contextual effects, the greater the relevance of a fact would be. So, as much the information would be available, new information would be available to the hearer and speaker, the greater of the relevance between a fact and the context would be generated. So, and the meaning would be generated in a more frequent manner as compared to any other situation. A new fact unconnected to anything that has already been known or has already been said is not worth processing. It won't create a relevance in the mind of the hearer or the speaker. But whereas a new fact is connected with the context, it's worth processing, or rather it automatically processes itself in the mind of the hearer. As far as the processing effort is concerned, the lesser the effort, the greater relevance would be. It can be explained by a simple example. If you want to trace something in order to find the meaning of some utterance, you have to trace something from the background, and the quickly you get that information in your mind, that would inform that the greater the relevance is. It means it's relevant and easily available. But if that would not be easily available in the mind of the hearer, then we cannot say that it's greatly relevant. So we can say the less effort it takes to recover a fact, the greater the relevance. The speaker assumes which facts are accessible for the hearer and speaks in such a way that the hearer can make the correct inferences from whatever he says. The context of the interpretation of an utterance is usually determined by the hearer, because he has to interpret whatever has been said by the speaker, whereas speaker assumes that the facts he is talking about or referring to are easily accessible to the hearer, and that would make a relevant and meaningful communication. The hearer interprets whatever is said by finding an accessible context in which he could find the meanings or relation of facts which are being said with the things available in the outer world, and that produces the maximization or the maximum amount of new information with the minimum amount of processing effort. If you could provide maximum input to the hearer without putting much demand on his processing effort, then it can be said to have the maximum relevance in communication. There are certain limitations of relevance theory also, which has been discussed by Cutting in one of his popular books. He argues that relevance theory says nothing about interaction. It talks about communication in general, but specifically how the what kind of processes are involved in human interaction. It doesn't talk much about it. It also doesn't include cultural and social dimensions such as gender, social status, nationality, and age. It talks about relevance of communication and facts or new information in a communication in an abstract way, and doesn't have much space for these social factors. Moreover, there is an objection according to Cutting is common with relevance theory and Grice maxims is that they do not include the cultural variations of various communication behaviors, because different cultures, countries, and communities have their own ways of observing and expressing various speech events or various maxims. In this situation, we might say that these theories, especially that of relevance, does not include these international or intranational cultural variations of performing certain maxims, because one maxim may be seen in a one way in one context, and another can be seen in a different way in another context. Broadly speaking, we can see that we have different ways of showing polite behavior or frankness in Eastern and Western cultures. Therefore, the maxim on which these elements of politeness or frankness are based on should be different in both cultures. Similarly, the elements of relevance should be different in these cultures. But according to Cutting, the relevance theory does not clearly include these intercultural variations in the performance of various speech acts or maxims.